Doom is a series that needs no introduction. While not the first of its kind, this dinky little FPS from id Software was one of the biggest and most influential titles ever when it first hit the scenes in December of 1993. And not only was the first Doom a hit that was mega awesome, but practically every game in the series after that was very awesome as well, and beloved by the gaming consensus. Well, except maybe Doom 3, to an extent, depending on who you ask. Although I love that game personally. Regardless, the 1990s was the time when id Software was one of the kings of gaming, a studio that seemingly could do no wrong. But once the 21st century hit, id Software was no longer reigning supreme, and Doom's standing in the industry was in jeopardy. It was the late 2000s and early 2010s, and the FPS landscape was radically different from the days id Software reigned supreme. 2004's Doom 3, despite being a commercial and critical success, was divisive among its fanbase, and failed to recapture the hearts and minds of the gaming public, who seemed to have moved on to greener pastures. Following Doom 3, id Software would begin developing the next entry in the Doom series, but not only was their other latest game not going well, but Doom itself, as well as the company, was going under a lot of turmoil. And we're going to talk about all that. Today on Beta Quest, we'll be looking at the beta and development of Doom 2016. The year was 2007, a year in which the FPS scene, once dominated by id Software with games like Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, and Quake, was now dominated by EA and Activision, with games like Call of Duty, Battlefield, and Medal of Honor, with Microsoft still having some power with the Halo series. On that year, a small team within id Software, led by developer and id Software veteran Kevin Cloud, began development on the next Doom game, given the working title of Doom 4, and was to be developed on the then new id Tech 5 engine. The project will be alluded to by company co-founder and Doom veteran John Carmack in that year, and would later be somewhat formally announced by id CEO Todd Hollenshed. I don't honestly know how to describe what these two were trying to do, since it was not technically announced officially, or was it? I don't know. Regardless, both individuals made indications that the game would return to the old, fast-paced action shooter style of Doom, rather than the slow-paced survival horror approach in Doom 3, and would take place on Earth, like Doom 2. Over the years, Doom 4 would be regularly alluded to and discussed by the two, giving us a glimpse into the game that was being developed, with leaked footage in the late 2010s giving us a visual glimpse into what this was supposed to look like. The plan for Doom 4 was a game that was going to be similar in gameplay and style to the first two Doom games, as mentioned before, but modernized with a few elements from modern FPS titles, something akin to what Wolfenstein: The New Order would do in 2014. The story, revealed as not a sequel to Doom 3 and not a reboot to the series, was going to center on a human resistance fighting against a demonic invasion, and players were going to be playing as an average Joe citizen in this resistance, as opposed to the standard Doomslayer, working with various other characters to push back against the demons. According to creative director Hugo Martin when reflecting on this project, the story at this stage of development was like what you would find in a Robert Zemeckis movie. It was very realistic, grand scale, and deep, akin to what was common in other FPS games like Halo and Call of Duty, and would have made use of pre-rendered cinematics to tell this story. Returning to the gameplay, not only was it that hybrid of Doom and modern shooters that I mentioned, it was also to feature a new style of UI mechanics, with an objective and enemy compass swatch, a dossier, upgrades, weapon mods, Doom 3-esque weapon interfaces, and modern-style regenerative health. Weapons would be a mix of Doom weapons and weapons you would find in other modern shooters. You would have your usual chain gun, super shotgun, and combat shotgun, but you would also have assault rifles, bolt action sniper rifles, and PDWs. However, the biggest addition to the game would be something called Synced Melee, where players can walk up to a weakened enemy and finish them off in a violent manner, a mechanic that will become important down the road, and will be present in Wolfenstein: The New Order's combat in some way. The game was also promised to feature an online multiplayer component, which was to run at 60 frames per second due to the lower action, and was likely to feature its own servers, according to John Carmack. And all this was to be done with a new script based on C++, a type of superscript with scheduling and type safety, which would help improve performance, especially with the scripted sequences. Well, obviously, of course. And to top it all off was an industrial-style musical score by the legendary and epic Mick, which reminds me of Shadow the Hedgehog's music when I listen to it, which is cool. And that was what we were going to get with this new Doom 4 game. Everything seems alright, nothing too bad. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the Call of Duty elements, but it seemed like it would have been alright, pretty good game. But not all was well behind the scenes, and this was when Doom, the bad kind, would begin to descend on the game and the company. At the time of Doom 4's early development, id Software was working on another big FPS project, titled Rage, a much larger and more ambitious project that was taking priority in the studio in an all-hands-on-deck type of scenario. It was a new IP, and id Software wanted to push up Rage and make it a huge deal, but the game's massive ambitions, such as working with the impressive but somewhat problematic id Tech 5 and John Carmack's infamous mega textures, were resulting in technical struggles to make it all work. However, this focus on Rage meant that Doom 4 was not a major priority for the studio yet, and was resulting in development being very slow at first, although John Carmack promised that Rage's completion would mean that id Software would give Doom 4 the attention it deserved. Alright, that's okay, not a big problem now. Rage may take a while, but once development is concluded, we are good. Right? It would have been if Rage were released in its intended year of 2009, but development struggles connected to the mega textures and id Tech 5 will result in development being extended beyond that release date. On top of that, the original plan was for the game to be published by Electronic Arts, but Bethesda's parent company, ZeniMax Media, would buy out id Software, which will result in a couple of additional struggles related to contracting and financing, as Bethesda will be the game's new publisher. On a side note, by the way, bullet dodged, guys. Bullet dodged. This extended period of Rage's development meant that Doom 4 would continue its prototyping stage, and the project was beginning to evolve more and more away from the plans of a slightly modernized Doom, and was beginning to take more and more from its more popular contemporaries. To give you all some context, Call of Duty was outpacing all of its contemporaries around this time, and was now top dog in not only the first-person shooter scene, but gaming in general, being a colossal success and a money-making machine for Activision. Unfortunately, the series was also being heavily criticized for its annualized releases, turning this once awesome series of smart and intelligent FPS games into generic boilerplate games with little interesting elements or differences between games. And it also resulted in many classic franchises being turned into boilerplate Call of Duty clones, such as Wolfenstein, Turok, Battlefield, Medal of Honor, and Quake 4. Also, unfortunately, the small team making Doom 4 saw Call of Duty's success and decided that the new Doom 4 would need more of these modern elements in order for this game to work and survive in the modern FPS scene. We've discussed the regenerative health and cinematics, to which there was going to be even more of the latter, but the project was going to be taking even more elements, like reflex sights, turret sequences, and linear levels, all of which were aggressively eclipsing the classic Doom elements that were supposed to be there. In the late 2010s and early 2020s, we were granted those leaks I showed off earlier, and it was not entirely pretty, showing us a game that is pretty much just Call of Duty with a Doom skin, granting it the pejorative of Call of Doom. Barely anything in those videos was recognizable to what we know in any version of Doom, aside from the super shotgun and to some extent, this imp enemy. I mean, what the hell is this thing? A hipster demon zombie? Oh yeah, that is totally a Doom enemy right there, this hipster zombie, most essential enemy to the series. If it wasn't clear by now, Doom 4 was beginning to take a turn for the worst, and the project was not looking good, and it was especially bad when Rage finally released in 2010 on PC with a console release in 2011. The new IP underperformed, both critically and financially, and faced massive criticism for its below optimal launch. This was not good for the company, and it needed to bounce back from this with the new Doom. However, what they saw was disconcerting, as Doom 4 was going down in a direction that would not be desirable for the company or their fans. Developers at id Software agreed that this project, although it would have been a great game that could have done fine, was not Doom, and would not be well accepted by the fans, which would no doubt harm the company's image in the long run. From the sound of it, as well as what we saw in the footage, it seemed like the project would have likely turned into the next Quake 4 had it been finished, a project that was a decent game on its own right, but really didn't seem like a proper entry in its own series due to its identity being stripped away and replaced with elements from its popular contemporaries. Serious discussions took place as to what to do with this project, whether to continue working on this questionable project, or just throw everything out and reboot it, as there were some who believed that the project would do fine, including Kevin MacLeod. However, from these discussions, it was decided to just restart development, although some of those who supported continuing development on the Call of Doom version, including Cloud, would voluntarily resign from the project. But unfortunately, the bad times did not stop there. The Doom that we know now, which we will now just call Doom 2016, began development in 2012, with the decision being to reboot the game to be more like Doom 1 and 2, with a heavy emphasis on movement, exploration, violence, and action, but with a slick and modern take to everything, in the good way. And although development was rebooted, it was decided to maintain a few of the good elements from the old version, specifically the synced melee mechanic, which would be later called the glory kill mechanic. The story, although it was the last of their priorities, was also to be rewritten, with British sci-fi writer Graham Joyce assigned to write the story, although he will be replaced by Adam Gascoigne, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, after Joyce died in 2014. And the story was going to take on a much more juvenile and simplistic direction, replacing the very dense and serious story from the old Call of Duty version. The team also had to figure out how Doom would be able to stand apart from its contemporaries while remaining faithful to the original games. A challenge, especially since there were many young players who never touched a Doom game ever before, and the last game came out a decade ago. Regardless, this reboot in development was a much needed refresher after several years of hacking away at a project that did not seem like it was going well. But despite this reboot, Doom 2016's time in development was not going to be that graceful. Exposés were written by all sorts of gaming websites that painted a very bleak picture of the project, and although Bethesda tried to push away any concerns, they were all pretty accurate. Oh, and id Software also tried to put to rest any concerns, but they were struggling as well. They painted a picture of a project that languished in development hell, criticized aggressively for being a Call of Duty clone that was lame and uninteresting to play, and had to restart in development because it was so bad. These exposés and concerns would eventually get picked up by the gaming public, who were dumbfounded that a new Doom game existed and then got cancelled, forcing Bethesda and id Software to try and quell concerns about the project. Because, as many gamers know, a project that languishes in development hell rarely makes it out alive, and if it does, it's not always a good game, a lesson many gamers took to heart, especially with the disastrous Duke Nukem Forever being a recent memory in many FPS players' mind. However, as if these exposés were not hurting the project already, a major blow would happen to Doom 2016 that would terrify many gamers about the future of not only this new Doom game, but also the future of id Software. John Carmack, the man most associated with Doom at this point, and the last one left of the original id Software people, would leave the company in 2013 to pursue his interests in VR technology. The departure of Carmack would further harm the project's reputation, as it seemed like these new guys had no idea what they were doing, and the only one who would know what to do was no longer steering this ship. To many fans and critics, this new Doom game could very well be the next Duke Nukem Forever, or even worse, and they were preparing for the franchise to be the next in line of franchises abandoned in a hostile gaming landscape. It is now 2014, and QuakeCon has something special in store for attendees, but with one request. No phones, no videos, no recording devices, because they will be getting a special gameplay showing of Doom 2016. It is unfortunately hard to say as to what this gameplay showing was, as it was never properly released, although based on the bits and pieces that were revealed during an interview with id Software about the game, it seemed like a good chunk of the trailer or whatever this was would be recut for the eventual E3 2015 gameplay showing. Regardless, this decision to not publicly release the gameplay showing baffled many, as the only way people would know about the game for a while A game that, if you forgot, had been languishing in development hell and has a pretty bad reputation, would be through descriptions of this showing on various gaming websites, making many people think that Bethesda and id Software were not confident in the project. The actual content was also questionable, despite a positive reception among attendees, in which the gameplay showing highlighted jetpacks, which was actually double jumping, high-speed action, and fatalities, aka the glory kills. A different trailer that the public would receive that year, also shown in QuakeCon, did not really show anything, just a bunch of pre-rendered cinematics of the Cyber Demon, and a shadowy logo that looked more 3D with more spaced out letters than the final. And that's about it. Regardless, what was described seemed like a bit of a departure from the series, Doom 3 notwithstanding, and as you know, fans of any series would be very skeptical when a game departs too much from established conventions, and such divides would also come with a potential fracturing of a fan base. Regardless, the world would eventually get their first good look at Doom 2016 in the following year's E3 2015 of course, and there was still a lot of skepticism towards the game, due to all of the development struggles the project went through, as well as the lack of known veteran Doom staff on the project. It also didn't help that id's last project was not that well received, and Doom 3, even though it was a commercial and critical success, was a divisive entry among fans. Not only that, but Bethesda, once a well-respected developer, was already on their slow decline and already had many critics against them. How can Doom wow audiences with all this stuff against them? Well, the trailer highlighted an exciting game, with amazing graphics and lots of intense violence and gore, and the trailer itself looks close to the final version, with no clear differences between the original and final versions, aside from the slightly lower graphical quality and emptier arenas. The only clear difference is the F90 mark on Doomslayer's helmet, and no special marks, implying that Doomslayer was an ordinary Marine at some point, rather than anyone truly significant. We were also shown early versions of both the multiplayer components and the snap map features, which do not showcase any clear differences with the final release, and although they didn't generate that much hype compared to the story mode, fans did seem to somewhat like these features. At least by looking at the trailer. We'll get to that in a bit. The showing proved to be a success, reinvigorating fans' excitement for the new Doom game. And not only that, but it seems like Doom 2016 would release at a perfect time to show people, including other FPS developers, how a real first-person shooter was made. 2014's Wolfenstein: The New Order was met with positive critical and fan reception, as well as decent sales, due to the skillful blend of old and new FPS concepts in a very exciting and refreshing game against an oversaturated market of Call of Duty clones. If Doom 2016 could follow up on Wolfenstein's success, these two could prove that old school FPS design had a place in the modern gaming environment, and they could also use their awesomeness to put Call of Duty and its clones in its place. But just as things were turning up, another questionable decision would be made that will cause more problems for Doom 2016. Unfortunately, it was decided that Doom 2016's multiplayer and snap map components would be focused on for future discussions and highlightings of the game, rather than the game's single-player component, a decision that confused many players because although Doom did have multiplayer components before, it was predominantly a single-player game, and it often used Quake for its multiplayer stuff. March 2016 would also be when an open beta would be released to the public, and it was a multiplayer beta, not the single player. Darn it. And the feedback was not that great, with many comparing the mode to something more like Call of Duty, which made sense because the multiplayer mode was made by the same guys who made the multiplayer modes for Call of Duty and Halo. The multiplayer mode was the very thing fans were scared that Doom would turn into, and there were renewed concerns about this Doom 2016 being yet another Call of Duty clone. It's possible that the focus on multiplayer and snap maps was done because Bethesda, due to all the struggles and uncertainty surrounding Doom 2016, were concerned that no one wanted to play the single player and wanted to pivot on the game's more marketable elements to any willing customers, since multiplayer shooters were huge, and the snap map would allow for more content to be made and keep the game alive. Regardless of why this was happening, it was also around this time that the decision was made to withhold review copies, a decision which further intensified worries that this Doom game was not going to be good, as withholding review copies meant that the studio and/or publisher does not want negative reviews to impact the game's sales. This suggested that Doom 2016 was possibly bad, and Bethesda knew it and did not want reviewers spilling the beans to consumers, therefore causing consumers to become impatient, make an impulse buy, and find out themselves. Regardless, fans had to just wait and see. So, it was waiting time, and the game would finally be released in May of 2016, and the reviews finally came in. And it seemed like the game was good. Very awesome, in fact. And a return to form for the long-missed series. Could Doom finally be back? As it turns out, yes. Doom 2016 was released to critical acclaim, both from fans and critics, praising the single-player campaign to hell and back, with its perfect blend of action and exploration, its good storytelling, as well as that fantastic music by Mick Gordon, while the multiplayer and snap map modes were given moderate reviews. Doom 2016's multiplayer mode was described as alright, but just an average Call of Duty-like mode with a Doom skin thrown onto it, while the snap map mode saw more favorable reviews but criticized for its limited amount of themes. Despite these minor issues, Doom 2016 was a huge success and would rejuvenate the long dormant series, allowing us to get the similarly awesome Doom Eternal in 2020, now with a very awesome multiplayer mode, but no snap map feature, which stinks. But okay. Doom 2016 would also be somewhat supported over the next few years, with the game receiving a lot of DLC for multiplayer exclusively, except for the arcade mode, which is cool. Yes, I do not know why, as story mode DLC would have been far superior, and the snap maps could have been expanded upon too. But regardless, it seemed like everything worked out in the end, making Doom 2016 one of the very few times a game came out of development hell not only intact, but also in excellent condition. Now, before we go, I want to talk about cut content found in Doom 2016's code, as well as some other things, because there's a decent amount of interesting things here. To start, we have some alternative glory kills that were cut, for some reason, as well as some early versions of some weapons and models, some of which are from Doom 4, such as this assault rifle and this grenade. Some test footage also reveals an early version of the Doomslayer, which is a cross between the fully armored version of the final and the early military resistance hero of the old Doom 4. There are also some unused weapons, such as the nail gun from Quake, which I wish was included in the final version, as well as an early version of the pistol, using the design from the older games. Although, maybe unpopular opinion, but I prefer the final versions a lot more. And there are also all these other models that I don't really know the purpose for. Maybe as collectibles, maybe as themed things for the multiplayer, I don't know. There are also some unused leftover models from Rage, such as his hand and soldier model, probably there for testing purposes. It should also be mentioned that Doom 2016's music was originally going to be more electronic, as Mick Gordon was instructed to not use any guitars and to not do any heavy metal, under the concerns that the heavy metal would result in the game feeling more Bill and Ted-like than Doom-like. Gordon went with this instruction at first, but after composing electronic music for 6 to 9 months, he worked in more guitars and metal and managed to convince the developers to bring back metal for Doom 2016, which was a smart move, of course. It was also discovered that it was planned at one point to include cyber demons and summoners into the game's snap map, although they are not in the final for some reason why I do not know. Similarly, the Praetor suit wasn't unlockable for the multiplayer mode, but was also cut. I guess to keep the multiplayer balanced, maybe? I don't really know. The Prowler Demon was also planned for the single player, but was put in the game's multiplayer instead, and there were also plans for a free-for-all deathmatch and classic mode for the multiplayer as well. These are not in the final, but, you know, it would have been cool, you know. Dr. Samuel Hayden was also planned to be a human character named Spencer, characterized as a humorous individual instead of the serious guy in the final, which I'm glad they changed that. And, on a final note, it was also planned for Olivia to transform into a different monster in the final battle, with the Spider Mastermind boss being a mid-game boss fight instead, which I would have preferred seeing. More Doom bosses are good, especially Doom 2016's. But that was the beta and development of Doom 2016. As mentioned before, it is one of the very rare times where a game survives development hell in excellent condition, as most games that go through development hell usually don't survive it, and if they do, it's often in a bad condition. It seemed like Doom 2016 was going to go down this road, based on all the turmoil we have heard about over the years, and fans were expecting something akin to Quake 4 at an unrealistic best, and Duke Nukem Forever at a more realistic worst. But no, against all odds, Doom 2016 became one of the best games of 2016, winning lots of critical praise and awards, as well as being nominated for many more. It's a story I wish happened more often, but alas, it is not. And we will get to those other stories later down the road. But anyway, this is K-Steel Beta Quest signing out. I will see you all later. All for today, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Like if you liked, dislike if you didn't, and consider subscribing if you want to see more. Until next time, I'll see you all later.